Welcome to Grace in the Shadows. This is Dr. Marla Behler and
Dr. J.
Dr. Jonathan Behler. Well, hello, everybody. Hope you are doing well today. You can check us out at graceintheshadows.org. You can call us at 251-244-4645, or you can email us at drjonathan at graceintheshadows.org. We are truly in spring. The pollen is around and allergies. So
Allergies
fun.
are bad.
Oh, yeah. So if you are dealing with allergies, my heart goes out to you because you can probably hear my voice is sounding a little allergy-ish.
Allergy-ish.
Yeah,
sure.
that made a new word. So what in the news has caught your attention?
Well, Fox News has a story on a Texas track star that was stabbed at a high school track meet.
Oh, my goodness.
And he basically, a 17-year-old suspect accused of stabbing another teen to death, Texas high school track meet,
Wow.
allegedly confessed to a police officer shortly after the deadly attack. Authorities have charged Carmelo Anthony, a student athlete from Frisco Centennial High School, with murder after he allegedly stabbed 17-year-old Austin Metcalf, a junior at Memorial High School in Frisco, to death on Wednesday morning over a seat dispute.
What? Where they were sitting?
How did he get a knife in there?
Right. Well, yeah, that's first. And
then supposedly he's saying it was self-defense. That this guy, Austin Metcalf, went to, basically was telling him he was in the wrong seat. The wrong team.
Yeah.
And so he took his backpack and was moving into a different area.
Right.
And so he stabbed him because of that.
Over a seat.
And now Black Lives Matter.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Is getting into this, saying that, it was justified because he's black. And
what?
Yeah.
Over a chair.
This is not a race problem. This is a sin problem. This is,
I can't even. I have no words.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Welcome to the end times.
Well, yeah. I mean, you've got all kind of road rage out there, and now you got seat rage. That just, you know how churches, people that have their seat in church.
Yep.
Now, hopefully no one's gotten stabbed over that. But I know in church, people can be territorial about their chair.
In church. So
I guess we really shouldn't be surprised, but to kill over it?
Okay, this is a little bit overkill, for lack of a better way.
Yeah, that
Watch
makes
the
me
pun. It's
very
just
sad.
wicked.
Yeah, it is wicked.
No other way of explaining it.
Oh my gosh.
I hope that justice occurs here.
I hope so. We definitely need to pray for the school, the families, everyone, friends that were involved in that situation. That makes me really sad. So let's please pray for them. Like to give a quick shout out to Madison, Wisconsin. You are growing in your listening audience. We're very glad to have you listening. All right. So what is our topic today?
We're continuing our study in Romans chapter 4.
Okay.
And we'll start with verses 1 through 3, if you would read that.
I can do that. Romans 4, and I'm reading from the NIV version. What then shall we say that Abraham, our forefathers, according to the flesh, discovered in this matter? If, in fact, Abraham was justified by works, he had something to boast about, but not before God. What the scripture say? Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness.
So, we've studied in our study in Romans that Paul's writing. He gives us the bad news through chapters 1, 2, and part of 3. And then he gives us the good news at the end of 3 and here in 4. The rest of 3, 4 through 5, 4, 8. We hear good news in regards to salvation.
Okay.
How we can be saved. So he comes here and he's assuming some of these readers are Jewish.
Okay.
So, and the Jewish people believe that Abraham was like the father of their faith.
Right.
Kind of like George Washington is the father of the United States.
Well, that makes sense.
And so they looked at him and they believed that he was, rabbis would even say that he was righteous all the way to the law.
Okay.
Even though they didn't have the law yet. But that he was righteous by his works.
Let's go back. I know you were listening to a sermon yesterday, and I will honestly tell you, I never thought about the fact that they claim Abraham as following the law, but he didn't even have the law. And I honestly had never really thought about that. It's true, though.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get into that a little bit later. But
Okay,
yeah,
sorry, I'm jumping the gun.
No, you're right.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So what then shall we say? Okay, so Paul's building his case here,
Mm-hmm.
from Romans 3:21, and he basically does the idea of justification through faith,
right,
from works of the law make what God did in the Old Testament irrelevant.
Yeah.
He says that what then shall we say that Abraham our father has found?
Mm.
And so and he says our father, which we'll get to later.
Okay.
We'll get to now.
Okay, let's do it.
It's interesting how the Jews believed that only the Jewish people could call Abraham father.
Wow. Yeah, that's true. That's what they think. Yeah.
And they believed if a Gentile became Jewish, a proselyte,
Okay.
that he could not still, even though he became circumcised and he became a follower of Yahweh, could not call Abraham, our father, because it would be your father, he would say.
Right.
Because he believed, they believed that the Gentile, he was not the father of the Gentiles.
Right.
So Abraham is building a case, not Abraham, Paul. Paul is building a case to show that not only was Abraham justified by faith,
right,
but that he is the father of all people, all believers, not just the Jews.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, we all ultimately come from Adam and Eve, and so Abraham is in that line. So how can you say he's not?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
He says, for if Abraham was justified by works, he has something to boast about. So basically, if he, or anyone for that matter, is justified by works, they could boast about that.
Yeah. They could say, you have to do this, but I did this. Yeah.
It's kind of like a self-righteous person basically believes God owes them.
Right.
That's really cocky.
I cannot even imagine ever saying that God owes us anything, because we owe so much to him. That's crazy.
The boasting really is nothing about, because before God, every pretense is stripped away and it's evident that no one can really be justified by works.
Right. Absolutely.
Because if we were justified by works and we had to be perfectly righteous, none of us are.
Right.
For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God.
You're right. Absolutely.
You know what all means?
All.
In Greek?
Everybody.
It means all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It says, for what does the scripture say? Abraham believed God and it was accounted to him righteousness.
Yeah.
Genesis 15. This is before the law was written.
Yes.
This is before Abraham was circumcised.
Correct.
Because there was Jewish Christians that were saying you had to also be circumcised to be saved.
Yes.
Okay. So right here, God calls Abraham in Genesis 15 to come follow him.
Yes.
And he's going to make him a great nation.
Yeah.
And here it says that Abraham was without children.
Right.
And God says, Abraham, look to the stars. Thousands upon thousands of stars.
Yes.
He says, those are going to be your children.
Right.
And just in case Abraham doubted that, he told Abraham to make a sacrifice, cut a bull in half, and also gave some other animals, and he set it up an altar, put Abraham in a deep sleep, and God walked through this sacrifice, swore on himself that this would happen. He also says in chapter 15 of Genesis 15 that the Jews would even be taken over to a foreign power.
Right.
For 400 years and made slaves. After the 400 years, they would be freed. He would judge that nation, and that he would give them this land, and no one will ever take it from them.
There you go.
What a powerful thing. And
so
Abraham believed this.
He did. And, and as it says here, it was credited to him as righteousness. He believed in God, just as we today must believe in God and what God has promised us.
Did Abraham doubt? Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Did Abraham struggle? Yes. But he believed God and it was counted righteous.
He did. We all have doubts, but I think at the end of the day, we believe in God, and we believe God is who he says he is. and he is going to do what he says he will do. And we believe that as Christians, just as Abraham did.
And so generally, the Jewish teachers of Paul's day believed Abraham was justified by works, as I mentioned, by the law.
Right.
Ancient rabbis would say, quote, "We find that Abraham, our father, had performed the whole law before it was given, and Abraham was perfect in all deeds with the Lord." And so they take this, believing it was intuition or anticipation of the law, but the law had not been written yet.
What do they do with, like, Abraham saying his wife was his sister and things like that? I mean, what do they do with that? He wasn't following the law.
Twice he did that.
Right.
He lied and said it. Yeah.
Interesting.
And so the accounted or credited,
right?
That is in the Greek language or the Hebrew language. Hebrew language. It's accredited. It's accounted. It's an accounting term.
Right.
Justification is just as you are, making you justified. Is not God making us perfectly righteous, but counting us as perfectly righteous.
Right.
So basically, this is an awesome thing that God did.
Right.
And it was by faith, not by the works of the law.
No. And Abraham had faith in God. Even though he fell at times, he still had faith and he believed in God. And that was why he was credited to have righteousness.
Read 4 through 5, if you will.
Now to one who works, wages are not credited as a gift, but as an obligation. However, to the one who does not work, but trusts God, who justifies the ungodly, their faith is credited as righteousness.
So to him who works, the wages are not counted as grace. The idea of grace stands the opposite of works.
Right.
Grace has to do with receiving something freely from God.
Right.
Works has to do with earning a merit from God.
Right.
And if it was works, we could pat ourselves on the back and say, "Good job, Johnny.
Look what I did."
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
And by grace, we are totally reliant on God's mercy and God's grace.
Absolutely.
And the wages of sin is death, we know.
Yeah.
And so the wages we earn is the deeds that we do. And so we deserve death.
We do. We really do.
Yeah. It's not counted as grace, but a debt.
Yeah.
We owe, God owes us absolutely nothing.
Oh, no. You're right.
And yet we live in a system, a world system, a satanic system of where people believe God owes us his favor because of our good behavior.
And other people. Oh, you owe me this, you owe me that. And God should do this, God should do that. People are just very selfish.
Yeah. But to him who does not work, but believes in him is justified, who justifies the ungodly, is faith accounted for righteousness.
Yes.
The Bible says that our righteousness, our good works, are filthy, dirty minstrel rags.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like looking at Mr. Clean or the Tidy Bowl Man, where they have an illustration and comparing it to the dirt of the other competitors.
Yeah.
And we can see that even in our goodness, it's very relative to God.
Right. You're right.
And it's not even close to the purity and holiness of God.
Oh, no, definitely not.
And then it says it's him who justifies the ungodly.
Yes.
It's the work of God. It's the grace of God. He draws, he seals, and he delivers the unregenerate, those that are ungodly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So faith is accounted for righteousness. Faith, it's grace through faith. Faith and grace go hand in hand.
Absolutely, they do. Yeah. Yes.
Go ahead and read 6 through 8.
Okay.
Just in case.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm getting
No, that's okay. You're getting
I'm
excited.
getting wound up.
All right, that's okay.
I'm going to start preaching, folks.
Oh,
no.
all right. All right.
I'm kidding. Just in case you didn't get Abraham, and then maybe, he goes to the next father of the faith, and one of the most popular individuals in Judaism. That's David. King David. Go ahead.
Let's do it. Okay. You said 6 through 8. David says the same thing when he speaks of the blessedness of the one to whom God credits righteousness apart from works. Blessed are those whose transgressions are forgiven, whose sins are covered. Blessed is the one whose sin the Lord will never count against them.
So he goes to King David here.
Right.
King David of the Old Testament. This was a man after God's own heart. But he was a guilty sinner just like all of us. And he was probably worse than a lot of us.
Yes, definitely.
He was an adulterer. He decided to go up on a balcony one day. And
right.
I don't think it was his first day.
I'm sure it wasn't. Yeah.
He went up there and was spying on Bathsheba.
Right. Taking a bath.
Yeah, taking a bath. Bathsheba.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he basically wanted her. And so he took her, had sex with her. She got pregnant. Then he ended up trying to cover all that up. And he had Uriah the Hittite, her husband, killed in battle, murdered.
After he tried to trick him to go sleep with her. Yeah, all kind of stuff.
And so this is a man that could testify that righteousness from works cannot happen.
True.
And so he says, blessed of the man to whom God imputes righteousness apart from works.
Yes.
So he's saying that our righteousness has nothing to do with works.
No.
Has everything to do with the imputation of God's righteousness, ultimately from the Lord Jesus Christ himself, dying on a cross, taking our sin, imputing our sin upon himself and imputing us with his righteousness.
Absolutely.
By grace through faith, believing he died for us and rising from the dead.
And they're great fathers of the faith. Abraham and David and others were great fathers of the faith. But we, as you pointed out, as we talked about earlier with Abraham, they were not perfect.
Far from it.
So, you know, we can pattern our faith after them when they were strongest in their faith. But ultimately, it comes down to that forgiveness and the fact that Jesus was the only one that had a truly sinless life.
110%.
And that's how he gave his life for us. Yeah.
9 through 12. Getting good.
Is this blessedness only for the circumcised or also for the uncircumcised? We have been saying that Abraham's faith was credited to him as righteousness. Under what circumstances was it credited? Was it after he was circumcised or before? It was not after, but before. And he received circumcision as a sign, a seal of the righteousness that he led by faith while he was still uncircumcised. So then, he is the father of all who believe, but have not been circumcised in order that righteousness might be credited to them. Verse 12 too. And he is then also the father of the circumcised, who not only are circumcised, but who also follow in the footsteps of the faith that our father Abraham had before he was circumcised.
So they're saying here that, okay, once again, Abraham was circumcised. That was his faith. And he's saying, well, he was, as we pointed out a little earlier, he was justified by faith before circumcision.
Yeah.
He got circumcision 14 years after God said that he believed him and was counted righteous.
Yes.
So it wasn't by the law and it wasn't by circumcision.
No.
And so Paul goes down here and he says, the father of all those who believe.
Right.
And it wasn't just the Jew, as the Jews thought, you know, we are the only ones in the faith.
Yeah.
It was all that believe in him, including the Gentiles, that had to really, had to make some Jewish people a little rift.
A little mad. Yeah. A little mad because they really held to that.
And so our Father, you know, if you are a believer in Christ, it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or Gentile.
Right.
You are a child of Abraham.
Yeah. True.
13 through 15.
It was not through the law that Abraham and his offspring received the promise that he would be heir to the world, but through the righteousness that comes by faith. For if those who depend on the law are heirs, faith means nothing, and the promise is worthless, because the law brings wrath, and where there is no law, there is no transgression.
You know, God's dealing Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob happened prior to the Mosaic law.
Right.
So really, we can't say that they were based off the law. Sin ultimately came about as a result of a breach in trust with God.
Yes.
When the sin in the Garden of Eden really was a lack of faith, a lack of trust that Jesus said what he said and did what he did, and the consequences of eating the fruit would occur if you did it. So it was a lack of trust that was ultimately the original sin.
Right.
Yeah. 16.
Therefore, the promise comes by faith, so that it may be by grace, it may be guaranteed to all Abraham's offspring, not only to those who are of the law, but also to those who have faith of Abraham. He is the father of us all.
Yeah, so our faith is a gift from God.
It is.
And the father of us all. Mm-hmm. Going back to Genesis 17, where, it's interesting here. We're going to get to here in a second. Abraham was like, I never had it. We can't have children.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Remember what happened with that?
Yeah. Well, his wife, Sarah, said, okay, we'll go sleep with my handmaiden. Mm-hmm. And she did. And she conceived. And they were trying to make it happen themselves. Mm-hmm. And then that ended up causing enmity in later years. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. That would not have been there if they had not taken the circumstances into their own hands.
Can you imagine, like 30 years prior, mm-hmm. God tells Abraham he's going to look at the stars.
Yeah.
Those are going to be your children. And they're having trouble having kids.
And every year after that, he's like, did I really hear God?
Yeah.
Did that really happen? Maybe it didn't. Maybe I was dreaming. And so every year he probably wondered, mm-hmm. well, it wasn't this year. Yeah.
And Sarah was in her 90s when she was old, pregnant, and Abraham was 100. Can you imagine?
No, I cannot.
As a matter of fact, the name Isaac means laughter.
Yeah, because
Sarah laughed.
She laughed. Yeah. She did. I think I would too.
Go ahead and read 17 through 18.
As it is written, I have made you a father of many nations. He is our father in the sight of God, in whom he believed, the God who gives life of the dead and calls into being those that were not. Against all hope, Abraham in hope believed, and so became the father of many nations, just as it had been said to him, so shall your offspring be.
Yeah. So, their womb, his seed was basically dead.
Right.
And he brought life into this barren womb. And it's interesting. And it's the same way with salvation.
Right.
We are dead in sin. Ephesians chapter 2 says we are dead mm-hmm. in sin.
Right.
And God does a miracle in our life. There's nothing else but a miracle.
Right.
That God regenerates our soul.
Yeah.
And gives us his spirit, makes us new by grace through faith, not mm-hmm. by works, lest any man boast.
Yeah.
And we're imputed righteous, justified before a holy God, just as we've never sinned before.
He takes us in our sin and heals that sin, takes it away. It's a miracle. It is a miracle when people are saved. That's why the angels rejoice. It was a miracle that Abraham and Sarah had a baby. They shouldn't be able to have a baby at that age. So you see the miracle of God through these things.
I mean, this chapter, Romans is a powerful book.
It really is.
And you guys, I encourage you to read and study it. Just don't take my word for it. And,
yeah, absolutely.
I think this chapter once again reminds us, right?
Yes.
That God can take our mess, turn to a message for his glory, for your good.
We really appreciate you listening, everybody. Have a great day. Goodbye.